Hello everybody, welcome, good evening. Okay, so welcome everybody to our talk about the Yelkouan Shearwater. My name's Tamsin and I'm the events coordinator at Majjistral Park. So we chose this topic because the Yelkouan Shearwater is currently in the incubation period at the moment, so it's the breeding season. And our guest speaker is Mr. Martin Ostad from, I'm probably not pronouncing that correctly, but from BirdLife Malta. He's the seabird coordinator, research coordinator at BirdLife. And let me just do a few housekeeping rules just quickly. So everybody's muted at the moment, so if you could keep your microphones off so that we reduce sound interference. But we will have a question session at the end. We think approximately the talk should be around 45 minutes, maybe an hour with questions. If you do want to ask any questions or have any comments, you can post them in the chat and I'll be managing that. And the presentation is being recorded, but if you keep your video off, that means you won't be in the recording, but you can ask a question with your video off or post it in the chat, like I said. And that's everything. So I'll hand over to Martin now, who's going to give you a presentation with some lovely videos and some sounds of the Yelkouan Shearwater. Thank you, Martin.
Thank you, Tamsin. Thank you for this opportunity. Welcome, everyone. And yes, Tamsin introduced, we'll be talking about the Yelkouan Shearwater, and specifically something to do with seabirds in Malta. We actually have 3 seabird species in the Maltese Islands. Yelkouan Shearwater is one of them. It's what? Sorry. The Yelkouan Shearwater is the one on the left. It's very dark above and white underneath. And when at sea, it flies with very fast wing beats. As their name indicates, shearwater is because it flies really close to the surface, even touching the surface of the sea with its wings. Then we have the Maltese shearwater, which is probably more well known with everyone, Chifa and Maltese. It's larger, the upper parts are grayer, and the beak is distinctly yellow. And then we have the smallest one, the European storm petrel, Andrutafilfla, which, as its Maltese name implies, is mostly found on the island of Filfla, but other places as well. And all these 3 species breed in the Maltese Islands, and we call them seabirds because they don't actually depend on land for foraging and not even fresh water. They can get water from the sea by filtering out the salt. This is unlike seagulls, which many people associate with seabirds, but seagulls actually depend on land much more than these 3 seabird species. Obviously, even these species depend on land to breed, lay eggs on land. Here we see typical breeding habitat being sheer cliffs, vegetated ledges, sea caves, boulder screes. But at first glance, you wouldn't think that there are hundreds or even thousands of seabirds nesting in these cliffs. They nest really deeply in burrows, under bushes. And during the day, they are well hidden, and they only come in at night. One of the reasons they do this is that on land, they're rather clumsy, although they're excellent flyers out at sea. As soon as they land, their anatomy doesn't allow them to walk very fast, or even while maneuvering to land, they're not, although agile, they're still prone to predation. So they only come in at night. And even during full moon nights, they try to avoid coming to the colonies. So that makes seeing them on land even harder for most people. Or if you do go walking night close to colonies where they breed, you might be lucky to hear them calling. Not be called singing probably by most people, but it's quite fascinating, and you should definitely have a walk around the cliffs to try either to hear the Scopely shearwater or the Yelkouan Shearwater. I'm going to play the first recording I have for you, which is Scopely shearwater with some Yelkouan in the background. Turn up your volume in case. I hope it works. The males of shearwaters are actually higher pitched in the voice, and the lower pitched are the females, so we can distinguish between male and female when they're calling. And there's the Yelkouan in the background. But now we can play the recording with just Yelkouan Shearwaters, which is actually recorded from Majjistral Park. And these are in flight outside the colony. If you do want to hear them for yourselves out in the cliffs, it's a dark night. There's no point in going during full moon because you will most likely be disappointed. The time to go is between, in reality, between October to June, but the peak of calling is probably around February, March. But obviously, if it's windy and wavy, it makes hearing them harder. And please, if you do go walking along cliffs in Majjistral Park, try to use red light and not any strong white light, because that will disturb the birds. And as soon as COVID restrictions are lifted, we will hopefully start organizing nocturnal walks again, as we did in the past with Majjistral Park and other organizations. So the Maltese Islands are actually really important for seabirds. As you can see on the map on the screen, the cliffs highlighted in purple have seabird colonies of any of the 3 species, or coincide like multiple species nesting close together. Yelkouan Shearwater, we have around 2,000 pairs, more or less, which amount to 10% of the global population, which incidentally is only found in the Mediterranean, being a Mediterranean endemic. With Scopely shearwater, we actually have more, but it amounts to less of the percentage of the global population. In the European storm petrel, we have the largest population in the Mediterranean, found on Filfla, with around 5,000 to 8,000 pairs. But as promised on this talk, we'll focus on the Yelkouan Shearwater. It's the only seabird known to breed in Majjistral Nature and History Park. And as I already mentioned, it's endemic to the Mediterranean region. both the Maltese shearwater and the European storm petrel nests in other countries in Europe, so France, UK, Norway, Iceland, while the Maltese shearwater exits the Mediterranean during the winter. The Yelkouan Shearwater remains in the Mediterranean and Black Sea region even during non-breeding. It's currently listed as vulnerable to extinction, making it the most threatened of our 3 seabird species, and one species that needs the most conservation, and therefore it's been the focus of multiple projects and conservation efforts, which not only benefit the Yelkouan Shearwater, but obviously the other 2 seabird species, and we believe other flora and fauna in the Maltese Islands. And of these circa 2,000 breeding pairs in the Maltese Islands, around 240 to 260 nest in Majjistral Nature and History Park. Here you can see where they nest. As I already mentioned as well, Yelkouan Shearwater start arriving in October, November. We'll start playing this video. But they only mate, and mating starts in January, February, for egg laying to occur in end of February, mid-March. So it's still a bit of a mystery why these birds arrive so early. We have several theories, such as meeting their mate, guarding their nest, making sure no other birds take over their nest, familiarizing themselves with the burrow, and so on. And then after mating, the females go on a 2-week-long pre-laying exodus trip, which, as it's called, which we actually studied a few years back and published by Marie-Claire Gatt and others. And here you can see a map that actually the females in this period travel further away than the males from the Maltese Islands in order to gather specific resources to make the egg, to build up the egg. And the males remain close to the Maltese Islands to make sure that they're guarding the nest. And as soon as the female comes in ready to lay, the males take over the first incubation shift. So it's really important that the males are ready there to start incubating, because obviously the female, after laying the egg, will need to replenish her energy reserves. And Yelkouan Shearwaters, each female lays only 1 egg per year. So this egg is really important to them, and both male and female take a lot of time to incubate it. Incubation lasts over 50 days. So each adult stays on the egg for several days, up to 8 days even, without leaving the nest, without feeding, without any food. So fasting basically, while the other partner is out at sea, feeding as much as possible, building up reserves to then take the next shift. And obviously, if this egg is lost, either to predation or any other reason, that pair would then have to wait a whole year before laying another egg. This works because Yelkouan Shearwaters, as other seabirds, are really long-lived. So although they don't produce a lot of young per year, over their lifetime, if successful, they manage to have a lot of offspring. Then, the incubation lasts around 50 days until the egg hatches, and out emerges a really small, cute, fluffy chick, which is taken care of by the adult for the first few days of its life. And then both adults leave the chick alone during the day to go out foraging and catching fish for it, and come back at night to feed it. And as the chick grows older, they can leave it several days without food to give. So then when they come back, they have a large meal size to make it grow faster. And here are some tracks that we've gathered over the last 2 years from GPS that are tiny devices. Actually, these ones were just under 3 grams attached on the tail feathers for several weeks. And you can see that from Malta, they travel even as far north as Calabria, or as far west as Tunisia, or far east into off the shelf into deep waters. And here is a video of a Yelkouan adult feeding its chick, which is now as big as the adult. This is taken at Lagoon, Madonna. To get this footage, we use trail cameras that use infrared flash, so the birds cannot actually see the flash and we don't disturb them. As they grow, they start losing this down that has kept them warm and cozy during many long nights and days alone, and start getting feathers ready to go out at sea, but in the meantime they look quite comical. And then comes the time to leave the nest and start training the wings and looking out at sea. And they are alone in this process where they might have friends from other nests, but adults will not be supporting them. They have to brave it alone. So these two birds are fledglings, ready to leave the nest. You can see the down on the top of the head of one of them. And yeah, they will leave on their first flight. But they won't do it in this video, they're still thinking about it. Yeah, so that was a brief photographic or video round of the breeding period of the Yelkouan Shearwater. I might have missed the period, so fledgling period would be around June, July. And at the moment, as Tamsin said in the introduction, we're in the incubation period. Anyway, so Yelkouan Shearwater has attracted a lot of research and conservation efforts, not only in the Maltese Islands, but around the Mediterranean, being so threatened and important to the region. We have here a photo from 1970 at Lagoon, Madonna with the pioneers in ornithology in Malta, or some of them, because there are more than them, who together set up monitoring programs for the species, which then laid a solid foundation for BirdLife Malta to start applying for LIFE project funded by the EU. And we're currently in our fourth project. We've had one, the Yelkouan Shearwater project, which focused on Lagoon Madonna as a site, which is the biggest colony in the Maltese Islands. That finished in 2010, if I'm not mistaken. And then we had the EU LIFE Malta seabird project, LIFE Archipelago Garnia, which many of you remember, only finished last year. We're also excited to be working with other Mediterranean partners, such as in LIFE Artina. We're working with Croatians and the Croatian BirdLife partner. And just this year, we started our newest project, and it's so new that we don't even have a logo yet. It's called LIFE Puffinus, where we're working with Spain, Portugal, Greece, and France to tackle the threats of bycatch, or understand and tackle the threats of incidental bycatch and fishery gear, and the continued threats of rats and biosecurity. But I'll go through some of the threats now and then talk about how we and everyone in the Maltese Islands and the Mediterranean can help to combat these threats and make the Maltese Islands a safer place for seabirds. So yeah, rat predation, one big problem for seabirds. They lay only one egg, so if that egg is predated by rats, they lost their whole year. And we have a lot of rats because unfortunately our waste management is not perfect, or far from perfect actually. This is a photo from Anchor Bay on the borders of Majjistral Park on a summer evening, where lots of picnickers and sunbathers have left their packaging and food remains. Malta is a used to be before COVID a touristic country with lots of boats taking tourists around our spectacular coast, which is also home to the Yelkouan Shearwater. So you can imagine if a boat enters just below your cave entrance every 5 minutes throughout the morning with loud music, loudspeakers, happy tourists taking photos, far from ideal. And then light pollution. Malta is one of the most light polluted countries in the world. And yeah, and now speak about how some of the ways we've tried to tackle these threats. In Majjistral Park, some of you will have noticed that sometimes there are ships anchored just outside the coast. This happens only during Easterlies, and they are there to refuel. So one ship would be giving fuel to the cargo ship passing through. And obviously this is not it's a risky process, so all lights need to be on for the crews to be able to maneuver safely. But obviously the light can affect the Yelkouans nesting in the cliffs right opposite. And here we have a graph of our work on the last years to monitor this threat. The gray dots is the illuminance of the cliff face. So the further up the dots, the more illuminated the cliff face. And as you can see, the luminance goes through a cyclical pattern, obviously because of the moon. During full moon, the cliffs are naturally really bright. But then during bunkering events, the ships illuminate the cliff unnaturally, and the brightness of the cliff reaches almost the same brightness as the full moon, which you can see on the graph. And then you have the red line, which is actually the activity of the birds. We've put small tags on their legs, which you can see in the photo, which registers every time they go in or out of one particular cave in Majjistral. And therefore, we have proved statistically that whenever there are bunkering ships in front of the colony, fewer birds enter. And this is obviously a problem. If there's a small chick waiting for food and the adults don't enter to feed it, this chick will become even more hungry and might not survive if it takes too long. Then we also have the light pollution from buildings, streets, roads, especially in coastal areas. And this has the opposite effect on, so the ships were preventing adults from entering, but for some reason, juvenile birds, the birds that leave the cliffs for the first time, get attracted to coastal lights. And every year we have quite a few birds crashing into coastal areas and found by members of the public. Some of them are in good condition and we release them back to sea. Others would have sustained injuries that are sometimes fatal. If you do find a fledgling bird in a coastal area that is unable to fly, a fledgling shearwater, please call us on this number. The season for Yelkouan Shearwater is June, July, sometimes August. The Scopolis shearwater tends to ground during October, November. Yeah, and we think that Malta is excessively illuminated. However, it's sometimes about the type of light fitting. It's important to have fittings that only shine light downwards with no light above the horizontal plane. And the color of the light here, you, for example, see one very bright white light and another less bright yellow light, and that's all about the temperature of the light. And we have been lobbying for less intensity light. So if you can contact your local council and increase this awareness of less brightly illuminated coasts, that would be really helpful. And in our last project, Life Archipelago Garnia, we actually worked successfully with Transport Malta to decrease light pollution from the Yelkovan ferry terminal, where you see the letter A. the fittings were changed to a lower intensity light, and obviously we're standing below the light, but the light is not being emitted above the horizontal plane, while at B, the color of the light is still very bright. So we managed to change some of the fittings, and we hope that this serves as an example for the rest of the Maltese Islands. We have another threat, which is boat disturbance. These large boats entering caves where birds nest. Here we again work successfully with Transport Malta to issue notices to mariners, which don't restrict where people can go with their boats, but rather the speed when they are close to land, which is anyway is safer for people swimming, kayaking, and smaller boats, and also not to have lights other than compulsory navigation lights and sound. So if you have a boat, please download the Nautica map from Transport Malta so you can keep updated with these notices. And then I'll speak quite a bit about predator control and waste management, because I think it's where all of us can make the biggest difference, especially now in this period when the countryside of Malta is seeing an even larger pressure from picnickers, people walking, which is actually really nice. I'm really happy to see so many people out in the countryside, but it means that we all have to do so responsibly, otherwise we're really damaging our countryside. Rats are unavoidable, and in the Maltese Islands, all Yelkouan Shearwater colonies are reachable by rats. So the solution is to put ticoagulant bait, and we do so every few weeks, only during the breeding period, to prevent rats from reaching Yelkouan Shearwater nests and causing too much predation. We try to use the least number of bait stations as possible to reduce the amount of bait we put in the countryside. And as you saw in the previous photo, we only do so in closed boxes so that other animals don't reach the bait, and only rats. However, no system is foolproof, and still some rats reach colonies. For example, Temple Island is actually within swimming distance of rats. And although we managed to get rid of all the rats in 2018, in 2020 and even this year, rats seem to keep on coming, probably swimming from the mainland. Yeah, here's a graph of bait consumption in 2018. All the rats ate all the bait and then died and didn't come back. But in 2020, the rat consumption remained high. We also use these good nature traps, which are humane traps without use of poison. And they work best in the non-breeding period when we don't use anticoagulant bait. And they're good in places where we cannot reach often, so we place 1 or 2 of these traps, which prevent then the rats from increasing within sea caves, where they could cause a lot of damage to Yelkouan Shearwater. Yep, and all this work paid off. We bringed record numbers of nestlings and fledglings of Yelkouan Shearwater in 2018 and 19, and actually 2020 as well. And I will show you some figures from the reproductive success, so the number of birds that make it to an age where they can fledge successfully from the number of nests we monitor. At the Lagoon Madonna, we've been doing rat control since the first project, since 2007. So there you can see that the reproductive success of the Yelkouans, it's been high for a long time. In Temple Island and Majjistral, we only started in 2018 during Life Archipelago Garnia. And we saw an increase in breeding success but not as high as we expected, which leads us to think that there are other threats, such as the bunkering, for example, or threats at sea, which we still need to understand, that are affecting these birds. And yeah, it's a pity that we still see sites like this, where uncollected rubbish is left for many days at popular spots. This one is from Lagoon Madonna. We really call on the authorities, and we will continue trying to work with local councils and management authorities like Ambient Malta, and where applicable FKNK, to try and increase the waste collection frequency. And at Lagoon Madonna, we managed to introduce bins that are rat proof, but there's so much demand from people leaving, visiting our countryside, that there's not enough waste collection services. One positive note is through Lagoon, where the Malta Tourism Authority increased the frequency of waste collection, including one waste collection round before dark, which is actually really important because rats are active at night. So any rubbish and food leftovers left at night will supplement rats. So whatever we can remove before dark is really important. And obviously all of us visiting the countryside, even though there are bins, think twice. Maybe it's better to take your banana peel, your bag of leftovers from a picnic back home, where the collection frequency is better, rather than leaving it in at one bin at Natura 2000 site. And yeah, we really hope to see more closed bins in Natura 2000 sites. Rats are really good climbers and can get into open bins, apart from the fact that overspilling bin in windy conditions will lead to a lot of plastic waste around. It's not only about litter left by people, it's also plants provide obviously food for rats, and the authorities, Ambient Malta and ERA, are doing a great job removing alien plants, but we also encourage more thought about what indigenous species we plant where, like the Aleppo pine produces cones with seeds that are a really favorite food source by rats. So any Aleppo pines planted in large numbers close to coastal areas will increase and boost rat populations, which will then affect the Yelkouan Shearwater. In Life Archipelago Garnia, we also tried hard to introduce the concept of biosecurity to the Maltese Islands, something which we will continue working on during Lifespan Puffinus. If there aren't threats, doesn't mean that rats cannot reach a location, and any measures taken to prevent incursions are really important, but also continuous surveillance and monitoring, so that as soon as any rat signs are detected, if any, the trained personnel can go in and remove rats efficiently and quickly. And our only rat-free location, completely rat-free location in the Maltese Island is Silfla, which is really important that we maintain that way. Yeah, and I'm sure all of you saw the videos from last Sunday where these Maltese Shearwaters were unfortunately caught on fishing line. It's called incidental bycatch, where shearwaters get caught either on hooks or in nets. In the Maltese Islands so far, we've not had much evidence that it happens frequently. But being long-lived seabirds, even a few incidents per year affect the population. Any loss to adult survival can be detrimental. So we really want to work with fishermen to understand when and where these problems occur, so that if there is one specific gear type that is causing more bycatch than other gear types, that we can work with fishermen to try and mitigate the threats. This has been successful in other countries, especially with albatross species in the Southern Ocean and African coast, which obviously had much larger bycatch numbers than anything seen in the Mediterranean. But NGOs managed to work well with the fishermen to find other alternatives. Like, for example, if the most bycatch happens during the day, then fishermen were encouraged to start setting their hooks at night, if this was one mitigation measure that was successful. And here I copied from our Save a Seabird guide for fishermen how to release a seabird that has been caught on a hook. And obviously, if possible, it's important to remove the hook, shown in the next slide. But the most important is to keep the bird calm and fold the wings into its body. And if you have a blanket or towel available, wrap it around the bird to hold it more easily. If you have pliers, and if you can actually see the hook in the beak, the hook in two and remove the remaining bit from the beak. Obviously, this is not always possible. If the bird has swallowed the hook, then you should cut the line as close as possible and keep the bird, and then take it to the veterinary care. And here again, I put this number, which is BirdLife Malta's emergency line, which you can call, and we will do our best to pick up any bird and then pass it on to the government vet. And yeah, with that, I close my presentation, and thank you for your attention. And yeah, I'll be more than happy to answer any questions. And also, I encourage you to really go out in the countryside, thinking that this is the home of hundreds of shearwaters and petrels. And for all of us living in the Maltese Islands, be really proud that despite having such a large concentration of urban areas and people, that we still have these amazing seabirds nesting so close to us. And yeah, I hope you manage to either see them at sea or hear them at night calling in the cliffs. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Martin. That was really interesting, and really great to know the periods of time where it's the peak period to hear and see them, and to watch out for them. So yeah, like you said, I hope people do go out to the cliffs, to those locations, to go and see if they can hear them. So if we're going out at the moment in April, there is a possibility of hearing them. Okay. Yes, does anybody have any questions? I think you covered it quite extensively. It's so exciting, I think, that we have between 7 and 10% of the population here. Do you know why Malta is such a good place for Yelkouan Shearwater? Is it simply the location, or?
Yeah, the location and the limestone rock, probably. Limestone rock provides a lot of crevices and burrows, which are ideal nesting grounds for these birds. Actually, they have to travel further away to good foraging grounds than, for example, the French birds, which have good foraging grounds much closer. The seas just around the Maltese Islands are quite deep compared to, for example, the Gulf of Gabes in Tunisia. So the Maltese birds have to travel relatively further, but again, for shearwaters, it's not far. Like they can do it in a day. But yeah, it's really the good breeding conditions that they have here that attracts these large numbers.
Okay, and they spend most of their time at sea, don't they? So, but they're actually going out foraging for food and traveling those distances.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, so I don't know, does anybody have any questions?
Yes.
You're welcome. Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Are they monogamous? I wasn't quite sure. I thought you said that if they didn't lay an egg one year, then they lay the next year. But I'm not sure whether they keep to the same partner or find a new partner the next year.
That they are monogamous, and obviously building a strong partner bond makes them more efficient breeders. Like in our monitoring, we really notice that the older pairs generally tend to do better than the younger and experienced breeders. But we've also in our monitoring realized that if one bird doesn't return, don't mourn too long and they quickly find a new partner. Yeah, this is especially possible for establishing several nest boxes where we can monitor the partners and so on over several years much more easily than in natural nests. But yeah, the answer is that generally they are monogamous.
Do they return to the same nest year in, year out?
As well, indeed they do. Yeah.
Thank you.
Problem.
Hi, hi Martin. Good evening.
Good evening.
I actually, first of all, I excuse myself for joining in the meeting a bit late, but I had an emergency which I had to attend to. I'm the chairman of the second largest national park in Malta, which is the Inwadar National Park in the south of Malta. It's been established 11 years after of roughly Asha and Gudia, and to give you the location, it borders from Marsascalas on Or Point up to Shaira, and part of the coastline is Zabbar, within the locality of Zabbar. It's a fact which is very it's not well known, but Zabbar has a coastline. Apparently, the reason why I'm asking you was that regarding the incidents studies in Lahrash and in Comino, and what is the current spread of its nesting habitat in Malta, on the island of Malta?
I can show the map again. Let me put it up. As far as I know, as far as we know, there are no shearwaters nesting in the areas you mentioned, because the rock is not suitable for nesting. But never know. Maybe there is some undiscovered colony that we don't know about.
The reason why I'm saying is I haven't seen the map, but anyway, it's probably you're about to start. Okay, yes, fair enough.
You see the map now?
Yes, I can see it. So basically, it's from Ben Isa and El Mara up to Gozo and Comino, the area of what they call Taprescia, etc. Regarding our part, we are on the low-lying. They are not so steep. But however, I refer to an article which was written and published in Malta in around 105 years ago, which the author, it was in Archivium Melitense, and the authors, I believe there was Despo involved as well. They had referred to the presence of shearwaters and other seabirds in Marsa Shlogbir, Zabuja, and Marsa Scala. Now, from documentation that I had gathered from Marsa Scala, where I'm from, the fishermen used to collect shearwaters because they wanted the feathers to use them as a lure in fishing. And an old timer, she's passed away now, told me, it's published, John J. Borch knows about this, I published it, that actually was actually part of the diet of the fishermen about 80 years ago in Marsa. Now, the issue is this. Do you think it would be possible for the Yelkouan, if it had the right habitat, to start nesting again at Inwadar? And I'm saying this because we have to see these features. First of all, unknown to many people, I assume we have the largest series of marine caves in Malta. It's in an area in Inwadar which is known as Iswali. It has a series of 6-7 caves. I've been in them, and I can imagine that Despo was referring to these coastal caves when he said that seabirds were. Secondly, there is the aspect that since 100 years ago, we have seen the opening of a dirt track and vacuolar access, which probably might hinder the nesting of the Yelkouan. The level of disturbance that it tolerates, how has it been analyzed by yourself, please?
Well, it's one aspect is that once a colony is disappeared, since it's really has high site fidelity, it's really difficult to recolonize a new colony. But what you're describing sounds really exciting, and I'm definitely going to take an opportunity to try and explore these caves, because, for example, Maltese Islands have Yelkouan Shearwaters nesting, over 70 pairs. And until 2013, the ornithologists studying Yelkouan Shearwaters at the time thought it had disappeared from the islands. And then during the second project, effort was made to visit the islands, and actually there were shearwaters nesting. So one shouldn't assume that they've disappeared completely, and they're more resilient than we think. You asked if it's possible to attract them back. Yes, it is possible. Other countries have done so successfully with other seabirds, but one has to be really careful that the threats that made them disappear in the first place have been tackled. Otherwise, you're just affecting new birds to the same fate as the previous, previous individuals.
I can send you the management plan brief, which was published in 2016. And do note that about any studies, obviously you can approach me. Do kindly contact me.
Thank you.
But you will have to go through ERA, through the Nature Permitting Unit of ERA, to also update them on your intention to investigate more the possibility of renesting within Inwadar.
That's correct, because actually, since we never worked there, it's not included our permit. We have a permit to work in basically all other coastal cliff sites, but not in Inwadar. So yeah, very good point. Thank you. Yeah,
That's
and
good.
we'll be in touch. Thank you.
You're quite very welcome to contact me. You'll find me on Facebook as well. Okay.
Thank you. I will.
Brilliant connections being made. That's good. Somebody was asking how much of a threat illegal hunting is to Yelkouan shearwaters.
Compared to other birds, not that much. We haven't had any cases of illegal hunting, because obviously the Yelkouan Shearwater is completely protected for many years, except last year, actually, unfortunately, where we did have one case of several individuals which were proved had been shot by an X-ray. The gunshot pellets were found inside. So I would like to say that it's not that much of a problem for the Yelkouan Shearwater. It's not completely absent, unfortunately, and for some reason, some illegal hunting of shearwater still occurs.
Okay, thank you. I don't think that there are any more questions unless somebody has one quickly now. I just want to say thank you so much, Martin. That was really great, and it's great to have you with us. Like you were saying, it's so good to have the walks and we have them in March. We were planning one last year, but we had to cancel it, unfortunately, because of COVID. But hopefully one day we'll be able to do that again. But in the meantime, we can have online talks and hopefully increase everyone's knowledge about the wildlife that we have in Malta, because we do have quite a lot here. I just want to say that we do have these talks once a month about different environmental topics. So if you do want to know what next month's one is and be informed about them, just send me an email. I put my email in the chat, and I can add you to the newsletter to find out about them. And if anybody is interested in giving a talk about an environmental topic, please get in touch as well, because we're always keen to find new guest speakers. And these talks are also recorded, so if you do want to catch up on anything or find something that you've missed, they're on our website, which is www.majjistral.org, and it's on our YouTube channel as well. I think that's everything. Thank you everybody for joining. I hope you have a lovely evening, and hopefully see you at the next talk. Thanks again, Martin. Unless anybody has a quick question now. Everybody is saying lots of thank yous in the chat, by the way. So everybody appreciated it and found it interesting.
Thank you, everyone, and thank you, Tamsin.
You're welcome. Thank you so much. Have a good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye. Bye.
Good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening.
Thank you so much.